Walk into a grocery store, open your electricity bill, or check your monthly expenses, and there's a growing feeling that something isn't right. Prices don't just seem high, they feel unreasonably high. Even when inflation is reported as slowing, everyday life still feels expensive. This confusion is real, because what people are experiencing is not just inflation, it's the result of hidden global forces quietly shaping local prices. And one of the most powerful of those forces begins thousands of miles away, in a narrow waterway called the Strait of Hormuz. The illusion of stability. On the surface, the economic situation appears to be improving. Inflation rates have dropped compared to previous years, and official reports suggest that price growth is stabilizing. But this creates a misleading sense of relief. The reality is that prices surged dramatically in recent years, and they never came back down. Instead, they stayed high and continued increasing at a slower pace. This creates a new baseline where everyday expenses feel heavier, even if the rate of increase has slowed. So while the numbers suggest stability, people are living with the after effects of accumulated price increases, and that's what makes everything feel expensive. The Strait of Hormuz, a small passage with global power. Far from the United States, between the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea, lies the Strait of Hormuz. It is one of the most important energy routes in the world. A significant portion of global oil supply passes through this narrow channel every day. Because of its strategic importance, even small disruptions or tensions in this region can have a major impact on global oil markets. The strait is not just a shipping route, it is a critical pressure point in the global economy. When instability rises in the Middle East, the world doesn't wait for actual disruption. Markets react immediately to the risk of disruption. And that reaction comes in the form of rising oil prices. Why oil prices affect more than just gas? Most people think of oil in terms of gasoline. But oil is deeply connected to nearly every part of the modern economy. It influences transportation, manufacturing, agriculture, packaging, and energy production. When oil prices increase, the cost of moving goods rises. The cost of producing goods rises. And eventually, the cost of selling goods rises. This means that higher oil prices don't just show up at the gas station, they quietly increase the price of groceries, deliveries, utilities, and everyday products. Middle East tensions and their global impact. The Middle East plays a central role in global energy supply. When conflicts, political tensions, or military threats emerge in the region, uncertainty spreads through energy markets. Even the possibility of disruption in the Strait of Hormuz is enough to push prices upward. Oil traders price in risk, and that risk becomes part of the cost structure for businesses worldwide. This creates a ripple effect. Energy becomes more expensive, transportation costs increase, and companies begin adjusting their prices. By the time these changes reach consumers, they appear as a general rise in the cost of living. The domino effect, from oil to everyday expenses. The connection between global events and local prices becomes clearer when viewed as a chain reaction. Rising oil prices increase shipping costs. Higher shipping costs raise the price of goods. Businesses pass those costs to consumers. At the same time, energy costs affect electricity production and distribution. Utility bills rise, adding another layer of financial pressure. Farmers and producers face higher input costs, which leads to more expensive food. By the time this chain reaches households, it feels like everything is getting more expensive at once, even though it all started with a shift in global energy dynamics. Why prices rarely go back down. One of the most frustrating aspects of rising costs is that they tend to stick. When prices go up, they rarely return to previous levels. Businesses adjust their pricing strategies based on new cost structures. Consumers gradually adapt to higher prices. Over time, these increases become part of the system. Even if oil prices stabilize or fall, the higher costs that were introduced during periods of increase often remain. This is why the cost of living continues to feel elevated, even when conditions improve. The growing role of data centers and energy demand. While global tensions affect supply, another force is increasing demand: technology. Data centers, which power the internet, cloud computing, and artificial intelligence, require massive amounts of electricity. As digital services expand, so does the demand for energy. This puts additional pressure on power grids and infrastructure. In some cases, utilities must invest heavily to keep up with demand, and those costs are passed on to consumers. This means that rising electricity bills are not just about fuel costs, they are also tied to the rapid growth of the digital economy. Supply pressure meets rising demand. The current situation is shaped by two powerful forces working together. On one side, global instability affects energy supply. On the other, technological growth increases energy demand. When supply becomes uncertain and demand continues to rise, prices are pushed upward. This creates a system where even small disruptions can lead to noticeable increases in costs. This combination makes the cost of living issue more persistent and more difficult to resolve. Why it feels worse than the data suggests. Even when inflation slows, the experience of rising costs does not disappear. This is because people don't experience inflation as a percentage, they experience it through daily expenses. A higher electricity bill, a more expensive grocery trip, or rising rent all contribute to a sense of financial pressure. These increases are ongoing and unavoidable, which makes them feel more significant. As a result, the economic situation can feel worse than official data suggests, because the impact is felt directly in everyday life. A system of interconnected forces. Rising prices are not caused by a single issue. They are the result of a complex system involving global energy markets, geopolitical tensions, technological demand, and economic behavior. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most critical points in this system, but it is only one piece of a much larger picture. Together, these factors create a network of influences that shape the cost of living. Understanding this system helps explain why prices feel disconnected from local conditions. What appears to be a domestic issue is often driven by global dynamics. What this means moving forward. Looking ahead, the connection between global events and everyday costs is likely to grow stronger. As economies become more interconnected, disruptions in one region will continue to affect others. At the same time, increasing energy demand from technology and population growth will add further pressure. This suggests that the current situation is not temporary, it is part of a broader shift. The cost of living may stabilize, but it is unlikely to return to previous levels. Instead, people will continue adapting to a higher baseline of expenses. The hidden link behind rising costs. The reason everything feels more expensive in the United States is not just inflation, it is the result of interconnected global systems. A narrow waterway in the Middle East influences oil prices. Oil prices influence transportation and production, and those costs eventually show up in everyday expenses. What feels like a local problem is often driven by forces far beyond national borders. And until those forces stabilize, the pressure on daily life is likely to remain. And maybe the real question isn't just why everything feels expensive, but how much of it is actually beyond what you can see. If this changed the way you think about prices and the system behind them, there's a lot more you need to understand next. So make sure you like and subscribe, because the next video might reveal something you've never noticed before.